Welcome, everyone, to the ChessKid Youth Championship knockout phase. We're here to see which of these four super strong grandmasters or grandmasters-elect is able to win our first under-16 championship. I'm FIDE Master Mike Klein. Some people call me Fun Master Mike, and I am here with International Master Irene Sikander. Irene, welcome back.
Hi Mike. I'm so excited for today. Finally, we come down to the top four for under 16. I'm just going to be very excited on seeing their games because these top four have been playing their best chess in their qualification group. And yeah, who do you think is going to be the winner today, Mike?
I'm not sure, but yesterday we had two favorites go through without any issues at all. Abhimanyu and Yagiz. We'll look at them in a second. We also had two kids kind of come out of nowhere, especially Andy after that slow start. But let's take a look at the format, and then we can start talking about who we think is going to advance. This might be the strongest under 16 tournament in the history of chess. I just kind of made that statement. Somebody prove me wrong in Twitch chat. We've got a 4-player knockout. The Group A winner versus the Group B runner-up. That would be Yagiz versus Andy. And we've got the Group B winner against the Group A runner-up. That's Abhimanyu versus Zemlyanskii. Best of 4 games. They're just going to play 4 games of 3+1. First player to get to 2.5 out of 4 wins. And Irene, what kind of money is on the line today?
Ooh, it looks yummy. The first winner is getting 3,000 US dollars. The second will get 2,000, and the semifinalists will get 1,000 each. Yeah, it's a lot of money for these kids. I don't think they need money yet. But okay, let's take a look at the cross table for today's matches. We have Yagiz will be playing against Eddie Woodward, and we will have Abhimanyu Mishra against Ivan Zemlyanskii. And as you mentioned earlier, we'll have 2 GMs with 2 GM elects. So who's going to emerge as the winner? Because these kids, they are quite close. Their strength and their skill, it's very close range. So yeah.
Well, I want to see if Yagiz can do the double-double. And he already won the Under-13 championship last week, and he's the only player playing in both. Let's take a look a little bit more at Yagiz here. He's the 4th youngest grandmaster in history. Of course, he's the youngest in Turkish history. He's played a lot of Chess.com games. In fact, I was following his progress after he won the 2022 ChessKid Speed Chess Championship, and I was in touch with his family. And this is interesting, Irene. You don't hear this very often. His family said that they weren't really in a race to get the youngest grandmaster record. They just kind of wanted Yagiz's career to progress at its own speed, didn't want to put any extra pressure on him. So Yagiz didn't exactly rush to try to get the record. He just, kind of did it in his own time. He wasn't specifically going after certain tournaments, as far as at least what the family said. So anyway, that's kind of cool. It's cool that Abhimanyu still has the record, right? I'm sure Abhimanyu appreciates that. But let's take a look at Abhimanyu, because he does still have the record for the youngest grandmaster in history. And I've got no problems with him going after the record. It's quite an honor to get a GM at 12 years old. So, Irene, why don't you introduce us here to Abhimanyu?
Yeah, well, as the highest rated player under age 17, I mean, we saw how he's a very well-rounded personality too from our yesterday's interview, and he's been showcasing lots of good games from yesterday's game, so I think he's also a clear favorite of today. Well, his blitz rating is only 2719, but don't let it fool you because he is belong to the 3000 group for sure. He just needs to play more games and to be more frequent as a Chess.com player. But yes, today he's going to play against Ivan Zemlyanskii, and Ivan Zemlyanskii is also a very strong player. I mean, he is just becoming a grandmaster. Okay, he's a GM elect. He got his last nom in the Sarja. But without further ado, I think we have a lift-off, Mike.
Yes, we only had one Italian game yesterday in all of our action. We already have one today. Ivan is the youngest grandmaster in his country's history. He's a GM elect. And here we go. We are off and running in the ChessKid Youth Speed Chess Championship, the ChessKid Youth Championship finals. And Irene, this bishop has ducked itself back to A2. Is white gearing up for D4? It sure seems that way.
Yes, this is a very classical approach in the Italian too, where you just put knight f5 in a hope to play c5, which black already achieved that, and we're going to see some transposition to the Rue-Lopez setup. So here, bishop e6 followed by d5, if d5 can happen anytime soon, but of course after this exchange, you are going to refrain from playing d5. And b4, this is a very thematic response to as white. You just want to play on the queen side and in the center, because the f file is already open. You don't want to play around the king side, because in the king side, black is totally dominating. So because of that, you just want to play on the queen side, putting all your pawns to get more space advantage, and yeah, and pressuring the double pawn on the e file.
I noticed yesterday that players, when they needed a break in the center, they did when they had a big lead in development. And I could see this queen coming to b3, then black is tied down to this pawn. I could see the bishop coming to one of these two squares, probably c3, and then the pawn blasting open to the square d4. I think if I had three free moves for white, I would play those moves. And by the way, I don't mean knight takes e5, knight takes c6, knight takes queen. I don't count those as free moves. Okay, anyway, back to real chess. The queen is sliding over. That's usually what you do when you get doubled your doubled e pawns, because the queen can slide out. So I think the queen's going to come here. The knight's going to come here. The knight's going to want to come in. Sometimes rook takes f3 becomes an idea. And that's all right out of chess 101 when you get the doubled e pawns.
But what is also very fascinating about this move is, Mike, look at the bishop on e7. It doesn't do any work. Actually, queen e8 is the idea with bishop d8, and you transpose it to b6, where the bishop has more diagonal and belongs to this a7, f2, or f7, a7, g1 diagonal. You just want to hit on f2. This is a very principal idea in the Italian. Now, after queen e8, it has so many ideas. Of course, you mentioned it, queen g6 is the idea because you want to attack the king. And I think with the inclusion bishop going over basic, this is also going to be a very dangerous idea that black will play. b5 is on the board. So I guess now Abhimanyu is trying to be more aggressive because he cannot waste any more time and letting black do whatever he wants. So AB, and now where does the knight go?
Yeah, good question, because the knight goes to d4 and white trades, then the bishop coming around the world doesn't make any sense anymore. The pawn's just going to block the way. Knight back to d8 resigns the knight to passivity, but it keeps an eye on this pawn in case the queen comes out. Or the knight could go back to a5 where it once came from, but the knight looks a little loose on that square. It can't get back in the game anywhere, and I could see it becoming a problem after white attacks knight again. So knight back to d8. Basically, I think black is saying, I'll take one inactive piece, and I'm going to play queen here and get my knight here. But again, your around the world idea is again precluded. So I think that's why white played b5. There wasn't really a perfect option for the knight, and honestly, it's not your job to give your opponent good options. So b5 is well understood now that it's been played on the board.
Yeah, so I guess this is a battle of wits, of course. White is planning something, or white is kind of anticipating black's idea, while black is, of course, trying to plan this out and attack to the king. And I mean, both players are very skillful in order to trying to find out your opponent's idea and try to anticipate, but also at the same time playing your idea along the way. So bishop b4, I like this one. You just want to deflop your bishop. Queen b3 is always within the radar. It's gonna happen anytime soon, maybe not now. And oh, maybe now is the time, because after queen b3 you have to move the bishop to d8, and maybe this is this is what Ivan has been planning all along.
I was not expecting black to regroup the knight. I thought the knight would just sit there for a while. So bishop back to d8. Maybe black could have played d5 to block, but anyway, we are past that point. And I would say the last couple of moves are in white's favor, because black has had to abandon the big idea of getting the queen to the g file. And if the queen can't get to the g file, then your queen can run over here. You don't need to guard the knight. You don't need to worry about rook takes f3 things anymore. So although the eval bar says it's, somewhat similar for both sides, the fact that the pieces are going to the queen side, I think, is a net advantage for white.
Yes, exactly. Well, although I really like the move b6, but it looks like it's too advanced and it might be becoming a liability in the future. But okay, there we have doubled rooks on the a file right now. So at some point, maybe Abhimanyu has to trade, and he did. And now what's going to happen? I was eyeing on d4 because I like to break open the center and probably pressuring e6 with my queen on b3 and the knight on d4 soon. So maybe it's not a bad idea after all.
Yeah, I like the idea. Now, keep in mind, the knights have to sit tight for a second in case d5 happens. You need to be able to capture here. Although, if we had broken with the move d4, takes, and then you try to play d5, you are risking the opening up of a double attack on this bishop. Anyway, the queen is slid over to put a little bit more pressure on this pawn and help inhibit the move d5. But again, as you pointed out, this pawn is becoming a little more of a liability than a strength, and white rushes to trade rooks so that the rook and the bishop cannot team up to win the pawn.
Yeah. Well, I don't know which one I would prefer to play in this position because both of them are quiet. It looks very equal right now with one idea attacking, one idea defending. Queen c6. Ooh, What happened if we just take? Do we have a pass pawn on the b file? And it might be actually a dangerous. So queen a3. If bishop takes, you cannot take a6 because there is bishop takes f2. It's such a tricky move. But instead, Abhimanyu took d6, which is a very good one. But we can show it like, yeah, queen a6, bishop f2, and white will lose the queen.
Yeah, so back to live chess. Just want to show it in arrows there. So white has lost the b6 pawn, but recovered the d6 pawn. I think white's pawns are a little bit healthier, but black does have the outside pass pawn. Again, you can't take. Do I need to draw the arrows again? Well, I will anyway. It's my job. There is still a discovered attack. Bishop takes f2. So knight takes e5. Not the most important pawn in the world, but it is a freebie. And now the computer says there's a critical move that black must play queen c2, and it was found by Ivan Zemlyanskii. Fantastic stuff. Giving away a piece, and now will it be perpetual, or is there anything more? I doubt that king is walking any further to g4. And Irene, I have to say,
Yes.
a draw as black is not bad. This is a short, little itty-bitty match. We're going to run over to the other game, but a draw as
Yes.
black is not bad at all. 4 games of 3+1. Every game is even more critical than yesterday. Here we see Yagiz white against Andy Woodward, and it looks like, I'm going to do a quick count, white's ahead of pawn, but badly underdeveloped. Maybe 2 pawns.
Badly under. Yes, but thank God that there are no queens on the board. So this makes things a bit easier for white because you don't have to worry about getting checkmated anytime soon. You can actually use all the time to develop your pieces and get a healthy extra pawn. But here the b2 pawn is always the weakness, and white is just going to trade all the minor pieces. If white managed to do so, then only white is standing better in the endgame.
Yuj has an extra minute on the clock or so. Chat, do you think that Andy can somehow make a comeback in this position, down 2 pawns, only 5 seconds? By the way, we are on move 20, and it looks like we're on move 7 because white has not developed anything on the king side. You just don't see that very often. And here we have a trade, which you said is going to be in white's favor. But white's real big favor is the 41 seconds versus 2 seconds. And white seems to be surviving. There are extra pawns on the board. The white king looks relatively safe. And Andy Woodward, the number 2 or second youngest grandmaster in U.S. history, is in big trouble in this opening game.
Yeah, indeed, he's in big trouble, and I don't think Hughes has some difficulty in converting this. King e2 and rook will come out soon, and now, yeah, knight d3, king e2, and is it ended? Yeah, has it ended yet? No, it hasn't. Yeah. Oh, okay. Now we are seeing the rook's endgame with 2 extra pawns. I'm sure this is a piece of cake for Hughes.
Yeah. Now remember, you were with me yesterday, Irene, when Andy started out with 2 losses in a row and came back to score 6 out of the final 8 points to qualify. However, I don't think that strategy, or even really that idea, is going to work today, because if you lose your first 2 games, you would have to beat Yuj twice in games 3 and 4 to advance. Okay, all games are just rolling on. We are going to focus on a full game of Andy versus Yuj since we only got a snippet. And here we go. Andy down a point. Yuj takes an early lead. And what kind of opening are we going to see? King's Indian, a Benoni, a Banco, probably a Nimzo.
Grimfeld, anything can happen. Ooh, knight after b6. This is the early premature b6, which is a bit dubious actually. I'm sure the evaluation will always favoring white, but it's a tricky one because you have 2 knights out in the board, and then you are provoking d5 to happen, and then you can put the knight to e5 to g6. It's a very tricky one in blitz. Actually, this is an interesting choice by Hughes to play it out. And d5. Now I'm confused what is going on. So if you take, I don't know, the knight on c6 looks a bit loose, that it can be pinned somehow, but maybe there is no good time to do it because the bishop on c8 will always be standby in protecting the knight from b7 or from d7. And here maybe what is going on? Like why Hughes is pausing? I thought knight takes d5 should come automatically.
Yeah, I don't know. You can't play here. If you play here, you lose the game right away, right? Queen a4 check, that old friend. So I don't know. We didn't look at the camera there. I wonder if he had to like blow his nose or something. But yeah, I saw no other reasonable move than knight takes d5. A little bit strange. But anyway, he found the right move, right? He got the job done. He's down 40 seconds, though. He was up a lot of time in that initial game. I have no idea what this opening is. Maybe it's the 2 knights tango. Should I call Georgie Orlov up in Seattle and ask him about about what this opening is? Okay, but we're back to real chess. And the bishop, I think, has to come this way, not this way, because I don't think after knight takes you have any fantastic knight move.
And again, this should come automatically. It looks very natural to just develop your bishop because what else can you defend the knight on c6? Well, there's queen d7, but I would prefer to keep the queen just protecting the knight on d5 and then use the other piece to protect the knight on c6. So I think it looks fine for black for now. It just if black can solve all the developing problems here, and especially e4 will come anytime soon here. E4 is just going to be the standard reaction for white, and then developing the bishop on f1 and possibly going to a6 or b5. So probably we can see that after e4, knight c3, bc3, it's going to happen anyway. And then maybe a6. This move, there is this prophylactic move, I think is, oh, no. I was mistaken. If a6, there's d5.
Yeah, good point. So let's go back and take a look at that. So if a6
Yeah.
preventing bishop b5, then we just hit with this move d5 anyway. And I suppose if
And
pushed,
then
we're just
b5, you just take.
we're just going to
Yes.
grip it and rip it. White is getting one of these pieces back, and we'll have an extra couple pawns advantage. So let's go back to the live position. e6 was played, and the computer says bishop a6 now. And if the bishop takes, I think you take the knight, and you force the king to e7, and you play bishop a3, and there's mayhem on the chessboard. So bishop a6, will it be found? We'll see.
I think so, because this
It
is
was
a very
found.
thematic position. Yes, bishop a6, even sometimes, even with the pawn on b7, we see this thematic action with bishop a6 too. You just want to decoy the piece or the pawn on b7 so that the knight on c6 can be unfree. Yeah, this is what I was actually afraid of, and maybe this is why Hughes was pausing for quite some time there before playing bishop b7, because I think he foreseen this possibility in the future, and he is now having some trouble.
And if queen c8, then we get to go back to your friend, Irene, your friend being d5. This is a master class on how to bust a weird opening. Bishop to a6, and I don't see any good moves for black. I think you have to capture and go into that queen takes knight, king e7 variation, and your king is going to take a walk on the wild side. Your king is going to end up on f6, which is going to be the second time that black has not, or sorry, that Yuj is not castled, although this time is much worse because the king is going to be out in the open. So here we have bishop takes happen, queen takes king e7, bishop a3, king to f6, e5 check. The king walks to g6, queen e4. We're in the live position, and that's just
Wow.
where that king goes now. It's totally bad, but the computer says not worse than minus one, or sorry, plus 1.3. All right, so king on f6 again.
Yes, you have to play f5 there. Otherwise, if the king goes to the h file, it's gonna be cornered, and maybe some mate is coming along the way. You know what? Petrosian is known for the king march from one side to the other, but I think he's going to wake up from his grave knowing the king over here. It is not a voluntarily walk out of the king, but because the king is forced to do so. Okay, now the question is, even though the position looks nice, but will Andy manage to convert his advantage in this position and utilize the fact that the king is out in the wood right here, probably using the knight h3, probably pushing the pawn to g4, something to do that's hitting the king on f6.
Yeah, there's a big question here. Do you try to play exactly precise and go for a mate or something? Or if he had just kept playing aggressive moves, he actually had about a minute time advantage, which is now down to only 15 seconds. So, but he wants to play accurately. H5 is a mate on the board, a weird one, but weird still counts. Black has to deal with it. Black may need to occupy H5 before white occupies H5.
Yes, and maybe now Yuz is thinking which one should I play, h6 or h5? Because anything to do with king h7, of course, that's the idea. But he chose to play h5. But the thing with h5 is it might weaken the position on the g5 square. I don't know whether it is relevant at this position or not. So queen here, king goes to f7, and I think the king is kind of a bit safe. Maybe now it's time to incorporate the knight. Yeah, knight h3 with knight g5, and how many moves already? The bishop on a3 is being unfree, Mike. It's been there, and Hughes didn't take it at all.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's just been sitting there. We haven't really been analyzing it. Black really wanted to play queen d5, but knight h3 would be the antidote with knight to g5 check, picking off this pawn. But maybe black's best case scenario was to give the weak e6 pawn to survive. Instead, black gives the exchange. e6 is still weak. It's still on the board. And I think the king will just walk to f2. No, actually, he goes pawn grabbing again. And it looks like Andy's going to even up the score. He's at 14 seconds to 2. He's got a better position. He's got a safer king. let's stay here and see what's going on. I do want to report that Ivan Zemlyanskii has played a minor upset. He has won game 2 and takes an early lead over Abhimanyu Mishra. If he were to win game 3, that would be it. 2.5 out of 4, or actually 2.5 out of 3, right? We would just end the match right there. We'll get over to that other match, but we want to see the conclusion of this one.
Yeah, it looks like after the trade of the queens, black is somehow having some hope now, because before I think I prefer the position with the queen on the board, because it looks like white was just completely winning. But now the two bishops is always a dangerous thing in the end game, and especially paired it up with a pass pawn. Although okay, something is going on right now that
Yeah. The eval bar
what's
is just going
happening?
crazy. And now, how can the rook defend the knight? In fact, he gave an entire rook. He may have hung the rook. And this is a comeback for the ages. Now it's totally winning for Yush. He's got an extra piece. He's got more pawns. He's even got a slightly couple second advantage on the clock. And this is really a tragedy for Andy.
It is, it is. Wow, and Andy just lost. And yeah, he's been on 1 second almost the whole time. And that's why I think he hung a rook and then Hughes could convert it and won the game. So what if we go over to the other match, Ivan versus Abhimanyu, because that is kind of like, it could be like the final game, and probably they're repeating what they have had on the first game, because we are seeing almost the same opening in this position.
That's right, Irene. A theoretical battle is happening. In fact, both matches could end here in round 3. If Ivan were to win as black, he would get 2.5 out of 3. All Abhimanyu needs is a draw from one of the final 2 games, and he will win 2.5 out of 3. That match will end rather suddenly. Really, really sad for Andy that he wasn't able to pull that one out. But that just goes to show you why you're the top player in the world under the age of 17. You find chances where others would not find any. So this is a little bit different than the opening round in that the B pawn got stopped on B4, right? It didn't quite get all the way to B6. That might be better for white, though. That pawn on B6 was a little bit more of a liability than a strength.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So now bishop on d8 somehow is a question mark by the computer, but I think I can totally understand bishop d8 looks very natural. Again, you want to put the bishop on b6, but maybe now it's time to play queen b3, because if you take the knight on a5, white will end up with an outside pass pawn, which is a more dangerous pass pawn than any other pawn, because it cannot be really taken easily. Down knight takes c6, so maybe black will take the rook first and then take the knight on c6. I think that should be the way, because otherwise the queen will be offside on a8 and the queen b3, and how are you going to protect e6? Oh no, I don't like this. I don't like what I'm seeing. White will just take on a8 and queen b3, or queen b3 right away, because now the queen on c6 is quite overloaded.
Yeah, the queen has to keep guarding the rook. I think I misidentified Yush. He's not the youngest player under 17, but he certainly is very close. So, but anyway, that's back to this game. Abhimanyu needs to make a comeback, and he's got a small advantage. As you said, the queen's a little bit overworked. This bishop is inhibiting the rooks from being connected. So I would expect a bishop move. The problem is, if you move the bishop, then the rook might be overworked, because if you move the bishop and the rook takes, you'd have to take back with the queen, because the rook needs to touch base with the e6 pawn. So there's all these sort of geometric things that the black has to focus on here.
That's right, that's right. And also, well, there's also another possibility of putting the rook on the c file. You just want to get all the free file for now, but maybe take on a8, and then, yeah, I think white is quite pleasant in this position. And although the position is kind of simplified a little bit because of so many tradings on the board, yeah, white is definitely better because of the position on the pawn. I think because of the b5 pawn cannot be really protected by the bishop, let's say, I put it that way. But okay, bishop b6, what happened after rook a6?
I guess you have to play rook b8. Knight d7 is possible. Oh, rook b8, you lose e6. So I guess knight d7 is the only move. So rook up, pinning the bishop and putting pressure on the pin piece. Knight has to go back, and black is just kind of barely hanging on, but barely still counts.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried. I just like to pin a piece like that and then use the fact that you should try to disentangle yourself from the pin before doing anything else. So it might take some time. And then here he played it. And queen here, you just want to keep pressuring the bishop on b6, maybe by playing king h2 first, because you just want to take b6 followed by queen a5, and then you don't want to fall on to check on c1. So that's tiny move. It's very subtle, but I think it's very important to also notice, especially when you have only less than a minute on the clock.
Well, let's see. Remember, as long as Abhimanyu does not lose, which he does not appear to be, we will have a game four. Just a quick status report. Things are about level in Yuj versus Andy. Yuj only needs a draw,
Mm-hmm.
but we are going to stay here and see if Abhimanyu can level this match by continuing to make this pressure amount to something. Right now, though, it's just one of those annoying positions where White has achieved a great position, but it's not quite clear what the breakthrough is. Sometimes in these positions, I look to improve my worst piece, which is the knight. The knight's not doing much right now.
Yes, but do you need to do? Yeah, King H2 is on the board. I like this move. So Abhimanyu and I think we think alike. We think alike. We like to combine all our tactical skill with some positional understanding like this. So I don't know why the commentators puts question mark there. Maybe because White has to take the bishop first and play King H2, whatever. But things are looking good for Abhimanyu right now because he has doubled major pieces on the A file and now offering the trade, which is nice. And I told you earlier, the pawn on B5 is gonna be hanging anytime soon. And now Black is just trying to get some compensation by attacking the back rank, and hopefully it will get to the king on H2 very soon.
Yeah, and the B pawn is weak forever. Never trade a weak pawn for a healthy one. That's why White guarded the E pawn. White can win this pawn at his leisure. And this is an inverse of game one, where White's B pawn was weak. As Irene said, Black's B pawn is weak. And White is saying, I don't want to give you activity and try to win your pawn. I would much prefer the activity. And rook F8, that pawn finally fell. And that pawn was
and
the
then
cornerstone.
G7.
Yes.
Soon it's gonna be a G7 idea. Yes, queen there, rook there, and then probably knight H6. No, knight H4,
Just
knight E5. Of course, knight E5. Just take, yeah.
Check, and I think you're going to play knight F8. No, actually, the knight just hangs,
Oh,
and
ooh,
well, okay,
Abhi,
F8 still.
Abhi
This is
forgets
weird.
that the rook was hanging on A7.
You know what this reminds me of? Is Fabiano's last round game against Nepomniachtchi and the candidates, where the queen and the knight were so annoying against the queen and the
Right.
rook. This is a little different, Fabio, if you're watching. I'm sorry. And it actually is not worse for White. Now, if knight F8, king H8, queen H7, that would be the Kramnik mate. Sorry, Kramnik, if you're watching. But you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so queen F7, and we want to keep the knight on the board. But wow, if Ivan can pull this out, now he's just down. And the worst queen of
Wow. Each of them just hang their rook just like that, and then now Abhi is back in controlling the game, and he's going to win this pawn end game,
Oh, we're
and
going to have
then it's
mutual
going to be a
Zugzwang.
zugzwang.
It's going to be
Yeah,
mutual Zugzwang. Who runs out of
taking
pawn moves
d4.
first? I think.
Yes. Yeah, white will have more tempo. Yeah, and now the match is back to even, and the last game, whoever wins the last game of their match is going to be the winner.
Yeah, I mean,
And
we're going to
then
jump. We're going to jump because we may have some news.
let's
I'm going to
do
jump to
it.
the other game. And
Let's
remember,
do it.
all Yuj needs is a draw to seal this match. They will not play a game four if Yuj scores a draw or a win here. And Yuj is doing just fine against Andy, but the clocks are ticking down. Okay, Andy's going for something on the last rank here.
Yeah, and he has to be careful. He keeps making mistake when his time is ticking down to 1 or 2 seconds. So, I mean, this is the beauty of this 3+1, of course, that you have to keep playing good chess while at the same time manage to be under pressure with the time as well. Okay, queen e4 is going to come, but where does the rook go? Queen e4 is going to be dangerous. So rook d3. Yeah, king a3. Okay.
Well, these are nervy moments. You have to stop rook a1. The queen goes all the way back. So all of White's pieces have gone backward to stop the threats. I think Black's going to need to involve the pawns here to get anything going. And White is trying to trade off those pawns, and Black has a little something going. I think the pawns are going to move up the board at some point.
You cannot take because rook a5 and queen e3, and then Black is going to be better, I guess. Yeah, the king hide on h6, and then there should be some mate coming soon.
Yeah, you almost have the rook f1 ideas. He's got queen g1 mate with ideas, and the queen goes back. Don't get a repetition. Queen up. Oh, it's very close to repetition, but I can't
It's
count.
very close to repetition, yes. Do not give any check on c3 anymore, because queen b4 is fine, maybe. Oh no, what is happening?
The computer will do the claiming, unlike real life. It's got to be close to a threefold. This is gripping because I can't. Oh, rook is e5. Okay, now we got a game again. Now there cannot be a repetition.
Yes.
Rook check, king up, puts something on h1. He puts the rook on h1, and the rook.
Okay,
He's
rook
got at
takes
least an extra
h2.
pawn.
f5 is a mate. f5 is
okay.
No, it was not a mate, but now it's a mate.
And Andy
resignation.
wins on demand. Unbelievable. Okay, so Irene, that was amazing. Andy won on demand as Black. He's still down 2-1, and because we focused On Abhimanyu's game against Ivan, we're going to stay right here on this match, although, of course, both matches are completely in the balance right now.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a look at the quick beginnings that set the stage. Andy needs to win again as white. And on the other side, things are completely level. Abhimanyu has evened up his match. So I don't know. Both matches are of consequence. We're going to watch here, and I'm going to keep an eye on the other game as well.
Yes, totally. Yes. And we see a Queen's Gambit accepted in this game between Andy versus Hughes. And again, Hughes just need a draw to proceed to the final. And he almost did it on the previous game because he has all the chances to equalize the game, but he managed to lose the game. But okay, this looks like a quite unusual type position in a Queen's Gambit accepted. And yeah, I think this is a perfect choice for Hughes to just get a draw out of this game.
This is the second game, though, where we've seen him really labor out of the opening as black. Remember, he played that strange B6 system
Mm-hmm.
and spent some really strange time on what we thought were obvious moves. So I don't see anything wrong with his room. He's looking totally at the screen. So just interesting time management, I'll put it that way. But when you're a 12-year-old grandmaster, I can hardly second guess you. Okay, will white be able to destroy this center? Let's find out.
Okay, so Queen A4, but this is not Ragozin because Ragozin is the Queen A4 was a wise move, but apparently here Queen A4 is just helping the knight to go to C6, and D5 is not going to be a good move, I guess, because of the counter attack on C3. So this is quite dangerous. Now, what to do? Takes here if you take the bishop, there's a mate on D1. So this is a
Wow.
strange position. Yeah. So this position is now, of course, better for black because otherwise, usually in that type of position, you took the bishop on b4, but in that position, you cannot do that. And now b5, what a move by Hughes.
Yeah, let's just take a look at that. How many people in the chat saw that one coming? Not me. Amazing move, and it was found. Prevents the
Exactly,
opening of the diagonal.
because you just want to step away from the tactic. If bishop takes a1, there is c takes b7 with queen takes b5, and then the bishop on b7 would hang, and that's why b5 you're attacking the queen and the rook at the same time. Oh, actually this is a check, right? So you cannot even take the pawn on b7, so you have to do something with the king. Yeah, b5, such a good move, and very well spotted by Hughes. So will Andy be able to he has to win, right? A draw will make Hughes win the match. So he
Exactly right.
already won. Yeah, he already won the last game on demand. So maybe he could repeat it again this time.
And now he's laboring a lot. He actually he's gone from up 30 seconds to down a full minute. He decides to end up giving away a rook for 2 minors, but black has this whole mass of pawns, which white is trying to strike at. It looks better for black. Not every time where you have 2 minors versus a rook are you better. When your opponent has this many pawns and this big of a lead in development, this is a problem for Andy. But I will say, Irene, he got an imbalanced position. There is something to be said for that.
Yeah, this is imbalance for sure. But unfortunately, Andy has quite lack of resources to do some attack or something like that. And with the tournament situation where he needs to win in order to equalize the match, yeah, it's going to be very hard judging from this position.
That's right. Let me make sure I've got the live position for you. I do. This is just a game where the players are bleeding time at the beginning, every move being so critical for the match. So at first I thought it was operator error, but no, Yuj is taking his time on this move too. He can't play a6 because his rook would be hanging. Bishop a6 is weird, but possible. I wonder what else he's considering in this position.
E4, maybe?
E4, yeah, blasting open the center
E4,
as best he
attacking the
can.
knight. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Or maybe a move like bishop g4, anything to do with, either you're attacking the opponent's piece or you're developing your own or creating some initiative, maybe doubling up the queen on the d file or something like that. Anything can do, actually, because I think black is totally in control in this position.
Finally, we see queen to d5 by Yuj, and still a slightly better position, but a very strange position. Once white can finish his development and gets the bishops and the rooks in the game, those pawns might start dropping. So this is not like an easy conversion. Of all the times in your life to be +1, this is not an easy way to be +1 for black.
No, it's not an easy at all because, well, you know what? I had a game with Robert Haas and where I was plus 56 and I didn't manage to win the game. So let alone this is only plus one, it's still going to be very hard to convert. But I have faith in both of the players and there might be some turnaround in the end of the game again, like what we saw in the previous game where it was, the eval bar is just going crazy and it might happen too in this match.
We're going to stay here, but Abhimanyu's in big trouble. Ivan's got a big lead, and Mishra is down to 2 seconds, but we are going to stay here so we don't confuse the viewer by flip-flopping back and forth. All right, so white has completed development. The c-pawn's in danger, but black was able to guard the very important e-pawn. It's not that easy to win this pawn yet, and the black rooks are finally going to make themselves known. In fact, the a-pawn might just run down the board. In fact, there it goes, a5, seen on the board. Knight d2, c4 is in trouble.
Yeah, you have to use your advantage. And, queen stepping away from any discovery with the knight. And, okay, it's time to get the rook on f8 to work as well, because the rook is not doing anything at the moment.
A reminder that white needs to win this game. A draw will not do. h4, trying to poke some holes in the king side. Just keep the battle going on both flanks. And unfortunately, the white pieces have been relegated to passivity. I do want to report Ivan Zemlyanskii has won as white and has upset the youngest grandmaster in history, Abhimanyu Mishra. So Ivan will be moving on to the finals, but we stay here. If white is able to win, we will play a 2-game tiebreak at the same time controls of 3+1. Okay, here we go for the finish.
There we go. All right, so knight c2. I sense, okay, there might be some sacrifice on. I need to trade the bishop, I guess. I think if we can eliminate one of the bishop and preferably the light square bishop. Ooh, sacrifice is happening indeed. If you take that, queen h3, and there might be some checkmating coming soon.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. And now what's happening? So Use is sacrificing another rook, and now Andy is down to a minute again. I mean, a second, not a minute.
Yeah. Black can probably find a perpetual, but black has got checkmate on the brain here. As long as there's no back rank mate, which I don't think there is. In fact, it is Yagiz that mates, and Yagiz only needing a draw, gets a win. He wins his match with 3 points out of 4. Mm-hmm. Remember, last weekend, he won 3-0 in his semifinal match. So a little bit of a tougher fight, as you would expect against a grandmaster-elect, but we know our finals, Irene. We have Yagiz Ardagush of Turkey will play against Ivan Zemlyanskii in our finals. We have a GM versus a GM elect. Wow.
Yeah, that's going to be quite a show there. And yeah, I also wonder whether Yagiz will be, double-double because he won the under 13 and he is having a great shot in winning the under 16 as well.
Yeah, maybe you thought we were crazy for inviting him to both events, but he was eligible for the under 13, and I, as you can see, very, very well qualified to play the under 16. It's going to be quite a final, and so I'm looking forward. It's going to be the same format. But before we get there, I want to let everyone know that you can stock up on chess merch at the Chess.com shop. We've got you covered with fresh new t-shirt designs, mittens, plushies, and accessories. Head over to go.chess.com/merch, or you can use the command !merch in the chat to shop now before it's all sold out. I have mostly ChessKid gear. I need to get more Chess.com gear. Irene, I know we need to send you some. But while you're shopping, we're going to take a short break. We're going to get regrouped for the finals. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back with the exciting conclusion of the ChessKid Youth Championship under 16 division in just a few short moments.
Reading people's minds, because then I could make better decisions when I don't know what to do.
I think I'll have to pick time travel. I mean, it would be pretty cool to go to the past and to the future.
I think it would be the ability to cure cancer. The reason for this is I've seen a couple of my loved ones suffering from this disease. I've seen it firsthand and it's quite horrible.
I would like flying because it's amazing.
这个问题的话呢，我希望我拥有分身术，因为它可以同时做很多不同的事情。
To make people's wishes come true.
这样的话，我可能会选择艺术体操。
I like such games as football, basketball, hockey.
Probably ping pong. I really enjoy playing ping pong.
For example, let's say soccer.
I would pick soccer.
Something like football or cricket. Probably football.
Garry Kasparov, Magnus Carlsen, Robert Fischer.
我最喜欢的棋手是王悦，因为他的残局非常好，而且他对棋有非常独特的理解。
Jose Raul Capablanca, because he's a great positional player.
Magnus Carlsen, because he's a genius.
Yeah, it'd have to be Magnus Carlsen. Yeah, I think he's just an inspiration for most of the younger generation.
It's Magnus, and the reason for this is the way he's been dominating the world for the past, I can't even remember how many years.
Welcome back, everybody. This is it. Welcome back, everybody. This is it. The finals of the ChessKid Youth Championship under 16 division. Before we look at who qualified, I want to reintroduce my co-host, International Master Irene Sukander. Irene, it's going to be a fun one.
It is. Well, it has been fun. Even under 13, it was very fun. And now we are going to see the last match of the ChessKid Youth, and we are coming down to the top two. It's Yagiz versus Ivan Zemlyanskii. And I cannot pick my favorite here because they've been playing so well in all of their games and even in the semifinal. It was unfortunately, Mike, a double elimination for the American players, but please don't lose hope because we are going to see the most exciting match of the final.
That's all right. After Copa America, America is just not having a good week in international sporting events. But we appreciated Abhimanyu and Andy being a part of this. Yuj, I think, has to be considered the favorite, Irene, because he has never lost a ChessKid event. In 2022, he won the ChessKid Youth Chess Championship with a combined score of something like 34 wins and 4 losses. He won the under 13 ChessKid Youth Championship last weekend. Here he is in the finals. He won rather convincingly in the semifinals. He went 8 out of 10 yesterday in the play-in phase. So for anybody who follows all of the ChessKid events, they've never seen Yuj struggle. If anybody can do it, though, it might be Ivan. 13 years old, Grandmaster-elect. As far as I know, he's an FM, and he never got the IM title. That's a great trivia question for chat. Who skipped IM on the way to GM? Ivan Zemlyanskii, I think, is going to be one of those players. His title is pending ratification. He will skip the IM title. Irene, I think I can name one more. I don't want to distract from the game, but the game hasn't started yet. Can you name any other players who've skipped the IM title?
Now you're asking about it. I cannot get it on the top of my mind. It's I'm sure there are some players who do that because I think in women, if I'm not mistaken, Bibisar Asobayeva came from an FM to be a WGM or something like that. She's totally skipping the IM part. So
Okay,
that
well.
is one thing that I can tell.
Chat, do some research. The games are underway. Yuj is white, Ivan is black. My guesses were Kramnik and Sirawan, but I don't have time to research it. We're going to find out if it's going to be a Grunfeld, is it going to be a King's Indian? It's going to be a Catalan. Okay, and now we've got a symmetrical position. We are off and running 4 games of 3+1, exactly the same as the semifinals. So pretty easy to understand the format. First player 2.5 wins, and this has been played a million times before.
Yeah, exactly. And putting the knight on e5 first, it is preventing the knight to go to c6. And if the knight goes to c6 right now, you are going to weaken the c pawn in the future later. And the knight on e5 is standing fine anyway. You cannot take it, you cannot touch it because the d5 pawn will fall. So that is the beauty of this position. Whoever gets to e5 or e4 first, then black or white is going to be the better version. So here, yeah, as I mentioned, c6 will be the weakness in the long-term weakness in the endgame too. So knight d7, rook c1 will come, queen a4 will come, and it's a matter of will black be able to somehow protect the c6 pawn in the long term, or actually it's going to be better for black if black can somehow trade this pawn. But again, the d5 pawn is something that black has to think about because you cannot just play c5 without worrying about the pawn on d5.
That's right. It's a battle of structures. Black wants to play c5 and get rid of the backward pawn, but black would need to play e6 first to guard this pawn, but then the bishop would be left without a real home. And so will black be able to get rid of this weakness? Now, white has played b3 because that pawn's a little bit annoying to protect without being able to put a rook on the b file, and that prohibits the queen from coming in. And if e5 out of nowhere, this is a different way to strengthen the pawn because with no pawn on d5, it's not technically considered a backward pawn, but white heads for c5 anyway because when a pawn is fixed, it is so much easier to target, just like in dodgeball if your friend has cement boots. Well, okay, I'm talking about a ChessKid video. Let's go back to real chess here. Rook over. I think that little trade of e for d benefits black.
Totally. I think the move of b3 before, it was kind of a wasting time because white has to anticipate e5 and instead he just played b3 without any idea, I would say. And now black is consolidating the position. Now I actually like black's position better because, well, the bishops are very nice. The knight is centered compared to the knight on a4. And the weakness of c6 is not really relevant anymore because you cannot really attack it. So maybe having the pawn on c6 is better because you have a center pawn on d5, which is very important. And now after queen e7, black is going to attack the pawn on e2, and that's why you just play rook fe1, try to anticipate this idea. But I like this push h5, Mike, because it's showing that, hey, I'm not afraid, I'm just going to kill you and then try to attack your king. And what are you going to do about it?
That's a great question. I don't know. It's kind of like white has achieved all he can against these 2 pawns. We call them hanging pawns in chess. two pawns that are connected and there are no pawns on the B or the E files. By the way, Karpov was a master at playing both with and against the hanging pawns. The number one thing, I'm going to say it again, if you're playing against the hanging pawns, you want them fixed. The more mobile they are, the more problems they'll give you. And at the moment, they are kind of fixed. You would never really want to push this pawn because then I think the C6 pawn will be lost immediately. So White is preventing them from pushing, but White is also not able to win them at the moment. The next couple of moves are going to decide the fate of those hanging pawns. And I do want to mention, Irene, you can vote in the chat. 2 out of 3 viewers think that Yagiz is the favorite as the winner. So most of the chat does agree with me, but we've got some Ivan fans in the chat as well.
Well, it's still very unclear. We are still on game 1 and both players have been playing very well. They are playing according to the principle and I don't see any significant mistake that they did in the game yet. So, and also they played very fascinatingly well in the semi-final too. So Bishop E3 is a question mark there by the computer. I guess, yeah, the knight goes to E4 and the knight is actually attacking G3 right now. So if White is not careful, the knight will take G3 because the bishop on E3 is hanging.
Yeah, I understand the idea of bishop e3, not just to target this pawn, but to further clamp down on the c5 square. But it could be that White is abandoning his king and is pushing a lot of pawns in front of the king. So computer didn't like it, but certainly from a human perspective, I understand why the bishop went back to e3. Okay, so how will White deal with this threat that Irene has pointed out? Knight takes g3, and this pawn is overworked, unless there's a brilliancy like bishop c5. But I'll bet you, Irene, Black can even give the knight for a couple of pawns to break through on the king side. So knight takes g3 might be a threat even if we see this move. In fact, knight takes e2 would be the antidote. Let's give White a random move. Do we have time? I think we do. White would never play h3 and a3 in the game. But after takes bishop here, I just spotted knight takes e2, and now White is just losing pawns for absolutely no reason. So let's go back to the game. Knight e4, queen takes, and knight takes g3 did happen. Now Black does have to get the queens off the board, but it still works. The rook still targets the bishop.
Yeah, although it's still working, but now with the absence of the queens, the attack is not going to be quite dangerous anymore. I was thinking after queen takes a7, at least if Ivan didn't find the best of queen e6, at least he could have played rook c7, trying to attack the queen on a7 and also possess the idea of taking the g3 too. So, I mean, queen e6 is the best move, of course. You're attacking h3, but at least you play rook c7 just to keep some hope alive. And now with the absence of the queen, you see how this a2 and b3 will marching forward. This is going to be very dangerous for Black in the future.
Very uncompromising chess. Both players seem to be ignoring the other person's threats in favor of their own ideas. Knight takes e2 because the knight was in danger and had to give itself up for something. And now I think you just need to move the rook calmly because the bishop is pinned. Very clever idea to sack the knight and patiently get the piece back. That was not that obvious to see.
Yeah, although maybe, I don't know whether bishop takes d4 is working. There is rook c8. Okay, that might be quite messy. But here in this position, it is still messy because although the number of pieces and pawns are quite equal, but Use just blundered this. I mean, not Use, Ivan just blundered this. Rook g6 is just a nice move now.
Yeah, I wonder, this is my nemesis, by the way, growing up, the g6 pawn, but actually everything is sort of hanging because the rook was hanging, and if you take the knight, the bishop is hanging, but if you take the knight, now bishop e4
first.
In between move, but then f5, I can't figure out what's going on. All three bishops are hanging.
Yeah.
And
okay, in the rook endgame, it's just going to be winning for White because White has, an extra pawn, and soon it's going to be 2 extra pawns.
Should be, although there was a fork of the 2 pawns, but White's going to have connected passers. Oh, I don't know about this move. I think the king
rook b2. It should be rook b2 right now. The king g3 is just a mistake, I guess. It has to be king h4. You have to move forward.
Well, the computer says rook d2 is the only move. If you play rook b2, rook I guess a5, and then your rook has to go to the a file and then b4. I guess that's the antidote.
But anyway, but White wins because of Ivan lost the time.
Didn't even notice that. Ivan loses on time trying to decide where to move the rook. I was thinking he was taking quite a while on that game, but let's just take a look at that final idea there. So if the rook goes to b2, which, Irene, was my first reaction as well, the computer actually is helping us and just saying, you just walk the king in and take the pawn. And it's actually simpler than I thought. Instead, apparently the critical move was to play rook here. Now if rook takes, you play rook check and pick off the pawn for an easy draw. And now if the king walks in a similar fashion, you have enough time for your king to walk in. I guess the rook being here prevents the king from taking and just walking over. That was not easy to know in critical moments, though, in the closing seconds.
Yeah, it takes some minutes actually to calculate all about it, let alone having only 1 second left on the clock. It should be just as confusing. So we will see the next game soon, and Yagiz will be playing as black pieces. So this is the perfect time for Ivan to make a comeback because, well, I would always prefer to play as white pieces. So maybe, with white pieces, you can try to determine the opening or try to determine the way the nature of the game. So we'll see.
Yeah,
Is
I
it
don't see
on
the
yet?
game. I don't see the game yet on my screen. We are giving the players a little bit of extra time to start, so we have got time to. So we're just waiting for that to
Yes.
come up. I do want to remind that in the finals last week, Irene, I believe that Yagiz beat Henry Tudor 4-2, which means they may have gone to a tiebreak if I have my stats correct. So Yagiz was pushed by Henry Tudor, perhaps more than any other player, but he starts off with a win here as white, and we're just waiting for game 2 to start. It is a best of 4 match, so Ivan does not have much time to make a comeback in this match.
Yeah, and no draw offer. I think in today's games, there's no draw at all. Am I correct?
I
Oh, there
don't
was
think
one
there's.
draw actually. There's one draw, but only one. I think it was in the earlier round. I think Ivan drew against Abhimanyu in one of the game.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. There was only one draw. And I think yesterday in the round robin play, we had about 2. Oh, we have a Sicilian Alapin.
We have
Okay,
Sicilian,
now I know
yeah.
something. Okay, I actually take the pawn and play d4. So now we're back to a French, and now I'm sad again. But we had a moment in the sun, Irene.
Well, this is not quite French yet because, well, the pawn is already pushed to d4. It is
That's
looking
true.
like some sort of a close Sicilian type of position, which is also very popular these days. And now Queen e2, yeah, this is like a pseudo-Reti French close Sicilian, all in one combining. So knight g6, okay, at some point this is an invitation to play h4. I don't know whether it is now or maybe later, but I believe with the knight on g6, you have to play h4 at some point.
Yeah, I think you're right as well. In fact, this is a King's Indian attack versus the French setup, a favorite of Bobby Fischer. And this is all pretty standard stuff, except the knight is almost never on this square. The knight is almost always on f6 and gets kicked after e5. So the big difference here is the knight pressures the e-pawn, but normally the knight would be back here. Look, I can move knights in illegal ways. I have some powers. So if the knight was here, I would say this is a Fischer game from the 60s. But instead, it's on g6. But similar ideas. This pawn is all by his lonesome, and black does exactly what you're supposed to do and attack it. Black may even trade it off with f6, but black has to deal with the fact that if the pawn comes, right now the knight has to go to h8. If you play f6, though, you will rescue the knight and give him a new square, and it's exactly what we see on the chessboard.
Yes, that's right. So Yagiz here is not afraid of h5 because he can just totally put the knight in the center square of e5 and then trading one of the knights. So that was his intention. But this trade will leave a forever weakness on e6. And this is something that Yagiz has to keep working on because it cannot be ignored that the pawn on e6, if you move it, you're creating some weaknesses along the light squares. So you have to do something about it.
I was actually thinking that white might play c4, bishop h3, kind of like a Benoni type setup. But instead, the pawns remain in a tension type situation. The queen runs back to d8, had to go somewhere, c4. So we are officially quasi in a reverse Benoni. No, we're just making stuff up. But white definitely is going to switch the attack to the e6 pawn. And I think the light squared bishop is the most available piece to do that. I guess knight g5 is not illegal, though.
I don't think white is going to be in a hurry to undermine that pawn because that is a weakness anyway. And I think in the meanwhile, Ivan will have to develop his pieces and then maybe putting the knight on d2 and e4. You have this type of King's Indian attack for white, and then you just have to use the attack first. And maybe in the long run later, you can try to undermine the pawn and then try to win some material advantage. But I think for now, the main task is to get the position better first instead of the material.
Could be a little bit of a trick on the board. If you play knight g5, then e5 might actually undermine the knight's protection. So just wanted to point that out. But of course, white is too strong for that. Ivan plays knight on b to d2. The knight has a very obvious square to jump to, which is very similar to a Benoni. You would normally control e5. In this case, it's e4, but same idea. And don't forget, white can always play for b4 later. Now, e5, that's got to be a calculated pawn sack. If you take, you're walking into a pin on the e-file, but black thinks that he has compensation in case the capture is made. Risky decision, though, for Yagiz.
Yes, risky decision, but I think it's very important to give that pawn up, because with that pawn being attacked all the time, used pieces will not be able to flop, especially the bishop on c8, and not to mention the rook on a8, of course. But with that pawn sacrifice, at least he will have some space to breathe for his pieces, because now the rook can come to e8, the bishop can come to d7, and somehow all the major pieces on the back rank are connected.
Yuzha's idea that if you play f4, you hang the g3 pawn, so your options are to take the knight, or I guess play knight f3, but then the bishop will just be targeted again, perhaps by the queen. So this is a nervy moment. He does choose knight f3, and now do we?
What about knight e3? that might be crazy, but I like this type of move. But maybe okay. Tactically, I don't think it's working. Knight e3, you could just take, and then take e5, take d4. Yeah, I don't think it's working.
Okay, fascinating idea. I cheated and looked, and maybe knight g3 to clear the knight out of the way for bishop g4, but that move is inhuman. I don't even think it works.
It's inhuman.
Let's go back to the live position. Let me see if I can catch up here, because now the moves are coming in quickly. White has solved the problem of the pin and now enjoys an extra healthy pawn. Ivan needs to convert this extra pawn to even up the match.
Not only extra pawn, but also this pair of bishop is really, really useful, because all the diagonals, I mean, just think about when the bishop on g2 comes to d5, and now the position around the black's king is kind of loose there with the pawn on h6. I mean, looks like the king is going to get mated in the 15 moves to come.
I agree. And first time we've mentioned the clock in the finals, but a whole extra minute plus for Ivan. So Yagiz is down a pawn, has a weaker king, has much less time. Can he work some Houdini magic here to get out of this? Oh, taking with the rook, because the bishop is stronger than the rook. Now you can pile on the rook. Queen e2, king f7, queen f3 type stuff coming up.
I would play queen f4, queen f6, yes, because the rook is not gonna go anyway, and then we need to pressure the king, so the king cannot go to a good square. And now I think this is just thematic winning. Like you play queen c7, queen g7 is there, yeah.
Yeah, there is no mate. There was a double checkmate I didn't have time to show you on the board, but maybe I can make a mental note to go back to move 30 and show a cool mate that didn't happen. Now, if you trade queens, you can't guard your d3 pawn. So this is a good decision to keep the queens on the board. And now it's an extra piece. It's a couple of extra pawns. And there's actually a pause here. He's looking for a mate, maybe?
Bishop f4. I think he's looking for bishop f4. Oh, queen there. That's genius, because you play queen g5, queen g7, and then you just promote. That thing, I think that's the idea, and you cannot stop it.
Yeah, that's actually, that's why it took his time, right?
Yes, promote with a check. I mean, that's such a good finish. I didn't think about taking on h7. I thought bishop f4, and then, try to save your bishop, but also at the same time later, you're just going to collect all the pawns on the 7th rank. But I think this is the best finish that Ivan just did on this game.
Match is tied up 1-1, and just go back to this moment. Rook takes rook, by the way, happened instantly. And if queen takes, of course, you can just take back the queen. But who doesn't want to see double checkmate on the board? I wanted to see. That's why I showed it. Okay, we had some time and we showed it. All right, match is tied 1-1. Chat, do you want to change your vote? Are you impressed by Ivan?
Yeah, I'm impressed by both players, actually. Ivan has been showing, like, you see how the game built up as a, like a theoretical line, and then it was quite a positional type of position. And then in the end, he finished it off with all the sacrifice tactical conversion. Like, it's amazing how these players are combining all their skills, their tactical positional understanding, and also their speed is very top notch.
Yeah, that was a clinical finish. Ivan looks like he's sitting in a normal couch. Yagiz is sitting in a gamer's chair. They're ready for game 3. It's basically become a 2-game match. We are off and running in game 3. Will we see another Alapin? Of course, this would be with colors reversed, because Ivan just had white. And we have, looks like a King's Indian attack versus the the French or Sicilian, depending on what you want to call it.
Yes, this could well convert to the other game actually with the reversal. Okay, except that you took the pawn on d5. Now we're not going to see that one anymore because in order to see that one, you have to push the pawn to e5. So this is totally going to be a different opening, and probably I would opt for a double fianchetto here, playing b3 and then bishop b2, because it's always a question where bishop c1 will develop, whether you put b3 or you put d3.
Yeah, I would assume D3 is going to happen and not B3, but I can't give you a good explanation. Maybe because he's going to play D4. Okay, when you play Rook
He's
D1,
going to play d4.
yeah, you're not hiding
Yes.
your intentions now. D4 is going to happen. The reason that mentally I thought the D pawn would push is because I want my queen to guard C2. For example, in this type of position. Okay, so can you play D4 now? Do you have enough firepower? Instead, no, D3. There was a little bit too much for black aiming at the D4 square.
Yes, and now where does the knight go? If the knight goes to e4, I don't think that's a perfect position because there's f5, and then you just want to build up all this attack on the center, bishop f6 with the idea of, oh no, I mean c2 is always hanging, yeah? And then the knight can come back to b4 before it's getting trapped. So it's going to be a healthy extra pawn for black. So after taking on d4, the knight has to maybe come back to b1 and then perhaps play a3, kick the knight out, and then you come out again with knight d2. So probably that is no, but knight e4 is already on the board.
Yeah, and he
followed
played
by
e5 rather instantly, so we don't know what he didn't like about f5, but he played e5. We're in the live position.
Oh, after f5, there's a3.
Good point. Yep, if you can't have a safe place for the knight, that's the one time you have my permission to look for counterattacks. If you have no normal defense, then you can answer an attack with an attack. But for most of our beginner players out there, try to answer an attack with a defense, unless you're a grandmaster like Yagiz.
Right. All right. So now knight goes back to c6 because he knows that a3 will happen anyway. So, what g4? Am I saying it correctly?
Actually, if you study your Benoni, Irene, and the reason that you're a good player is because you don't study the Benoni, this is a very typical idea. Even after f5, you're willing to injure your own kingside pawns because you value the e4 square so much that you're willing to cripple your kingside pawns. So I don't actually know if it's applicable in this position, but a 2600 player played it, so it can't be too bad. But actually, it's pretty typical of this. Again, reverse Benoni. I know we've had it twice in a row, but that's what it is. So.
All right. Wow. I'm learning something new every day. So thank you for spotting that out. So maybe after this, yes, f5. I was a bit worried about that because now the king, as you said, it's crimpling the position around the king and now doubling up the work on the f file. I'm a bit worried for white in this position.
Yeah, there is some weaknesses to the king, and I think that what you've done here as white is you've really wrecked your king, as I said, just to control one square. And time will tell if it's actually end up worth it to do so. Black's position looks a little more compact, a little more solid, but we will see what ends up unfolding here. This match is tied 1-1. We do want to point out there's a 40-second advantage for Ivan, second straight game. He's had a big advantage on the clock.
Yeah, he's been very, very fast. I don't know how he managed to do it because the position is not very easy to play it out. I mean, it's quite complex ideas with, a lot of recalling about the ideas, the principles, and also calculating the variations. Yeah, I don't know how Ivan is managing to think so fast like that and still maintaining a good lead in the position.
I wonder if white has benefited by trading bishops. In fact, knight g3 does just that. He's going to replace the knight with the bishop, and then the knight gets to sit on e4 basically forever because this knight, as it's well known, it takes 4 turns to be able to go 2 squares away diagonally. And it takes a little bit of the heat off of the h3 pawn. It also helps you develop your rook on the g file. So it looks like he's going to put the bishop on e4, or he could go back, which is a tacit draw offer, right? It's possible. But I don't think Yagiz wants to waste his final white in the match just drawing in the opening.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think the pawn on h3 will forever be a liability. So the bishop on g2 is not very... I thought it's not going to move because the h3 pawn is hanging, but maybe I'm wrong. Am I missing something? Oh, there is queen h5. Queen h5, a double attack to h7 mate, and the bishop on h3 is also hanging. Okay, what a trap that Yagiz is setting up right now. So h3 is untouchable. So instead of bishop takes h3, what can black do in this position?
That's a great question. You don't really want to play g6 and give your opponent a target, but you know queen h5 is coming. And if I'm being completely honest, Irene, I did not see that h3 was hanging. I got lucky that queen h5 existed, but it exists nonetheless. And now black has to figure out what to do. So the queen goes back. And now if queen here, the queen's
Rook
guarded by the
F2.
knight. So it's just capturing. Yeah,
There's
you're not
rook
discover
F2,
attacking
yeah.
a win. You're just winning a pawn.
Exactly. Now, I think if you want to step the bishop away to c8 and setting up the battery with bishop c8, queen d7, that might be one of the ideas, but I think it's a bit too late because now the rook on g2 is protecting f2, and now white is going to double up the rook on the g file. And not only that, now white is attacking h7, white will attack the g7 pawn as well. So bishop h4 is on the board, doubling up the rook on the g file is a good idea. And now, thanks to the double bishop, the pair of bishop is looking so nice here. Don't trade. If you want to win, don't trade the bishop. Yep.
I had crazy thoughts in my head of the bishop taking and a rook landing on f3 and queen h5 mate happening. That's not going to happen. Pawn to g4. Here comes the pawns. Only 13 seconds left for Yagiz. Its match is tied 1-1. We've essentially boiled itself down to a 2-game mini match, and the rook is running out of squares, but he finds one right at the death. Rook over to d6. And now black plays h6 to try to repel these bishops. But unfortunately for black, there's a big disadvantage. The bishops and the rook have all invaded. Rook f8. How do we deal with it? I don't see a way.
King h7. You have to play king h7. I think it's
but
the
then
only
rook
move.
f8, bishop g8 is going to happen.
Oh
You're going to find yourself in a
yeah,
world
that's
of
gonna
trouble.
happen. Yeah. I don't think you can stop it, can you? Rook f8 is going to happen anyway.
Now it's just damage control. But how do you even limit your losses? Pawn takes bishop and just accept the queen loss for rook and piece. That's what he's gone
And
for.
after
But there's
queen there?
Yeah, there's a problem. G8's a problem. The rook's a problem. Everything's a problem. It's made in couple, I would assume.
2. And okay, bishop e4
bishop
maybe now?
e4. I don't think you're surviving.
Bishop e4 and check. Yeah, I think bishop e4 would be better. But okay, this is enough to win. There should be some checkmate soon. And if you take, then there is queen h5, king f6, and queen f5 will do, maybe.
Queen h5, queen f5. The king is walking back. Okay, he just wins a piece, just wins more prosaically, but getting the job done. Now there's a mate, because as we'll see at the end here, Yagiz takes a 2-1 lead. The only idea was to put your king here or here, and it won't matter which square you pick, because the queen will go to
It's going to be mate.
5, yep. And then when the king walks here or here, it again doesn't matter, because queen h5 will be mate no matter where you walk your king. And wow, that was a great finish by a player who was really low on time in a super complicated position. I think, if I had to guess, the winning maneuver, Irene, was bringing the knight back and replacing with the bishop, which was a hard idea because the knight was so beautiful on e4, and I had talked a lot about it. But that's really what got white's attack started in earnest.
Yeah, what I'm amazed is how Yagiz could find such an idea within only a few seconds, right? Because in order to reverse this type of mentality, replacing the knight with the bishop, which is a very good decision, by the way, it's going to be so hard. As you mentioned, the knight on e4, it was beautifully centered. It's like controlling so many squares, and you've mentioned it in many of your ChessKid videos as well. The knight in the center has so many coverage. It has controlling 8 different squares at the same time. But Yagiz found the perfect plan to finish off the game, and this is just the way how to do it.
Thank you. And we are contractually obligated as chess commentators to say that backward knight moves are the hardest moves to find in chess. That is actually part of our contract. Okay, here we go. Final game, unless we need tie breaks, and the situation is incredibly simple. Ivan needs to win. He needs to win as white in this final game. Nothing but a win will do. And we have our second Italian of the day. And here we go. In the first time we saw this, I think we had a very quick a4 by white, but black did not play d5. Okay, so black is playing a little bit aggressively, even though he only needs a draw.
Yeah. So, well, I think I like how Yagiz is choosing his opening here. All of his openings, he never provokes his opponent, except that when he was playing against first move d4. But here he's just playing very solidly, especially in the center. He's playing according to the principles. He's not going to anything crazy, but he's just playing, develop the pieces, control the center, and once it's done, he's just gonna castle and then just play normal chess. And in the meantime, it's gonna be very hard for Ivan to try to mud the water because he needs to win this game. He cannot afford of drawing this game because he's gonna be losing the match. So although in this position, of course, there's always some drawback having the f6 pawn move too early because you always leave the d4 idea for white open in the air. White will going to throw in there at some point, so Yagiz has to be careful about it.
Well said. In fact, there are lines where you play queen d7 to guard the bishop. White plays d4 anyway and sacks the exchange because the light squares are so weak. That's not quite the situation here, but just kind of keep that on your radar. And we're seeing a pattern continue, Irene, which is that Yagiz is taking a lot of time out of the opening. I do think in this situation, he's actually taking his time on moves that are a little bit more critical because he sees d4 is coming, but he is not flying out of the start and gaining an advantage on the clock. So it's worked for him so far, but it is a risk. He's been lower on time in pretty much this entire match.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Ivan has been quite fast as well. Okay, so he steps the bishop away to f7 and possibly anticipating d4, but maybe d4 is not such a bad idea too to play in this position because you just want to break open the center. But what else can be done? b4? What do you think about b4 going b5? I mean, I'm sure white is still standing a bit better here.
Yeah, b4, I see your idea. If you get to b5, the knight has to move, and that weakens this pawn. I feel like it's a little bit of a distraction. I was thinking about playing d4, but the knight heads to h4 with the idea of heading in, but it may not get there. Black just plays the most normal move on the board, connects the rooks after castles, keeps the knight out of this square. Now, are we going to see g4, knight f5? I don't think we are, because after g4, h5, and the white king is going to get himself mated or something, but I don't know what the knight's doing on h4. Maybe f4 was the idea, but it wasn't played.
Yeah, he definitely wants to play knight f5, but even if the knight goes to f5 right now, I still cannot see the idea behind it because I think black's position is quite solid. Okay, that castle, I didn't expect it. I thought Yagiz was going to go the other way, doing the long castle and then try to attack from the king side. But apparently, short castle is also fine for black in this position.
Yeah, certainly seems that way. And yeah, if your knight gets to f5, as you pointed out, it's just one piece, it's just one square. Ben Feingold would disagree. He would say knight 5, but the knight may end up just trading for black's worst minor piece, which is that bishop back there. Oh boy, computer does not like knight d2. You've given up control of the f4 square, and now we have the blue arrow of criticality, meaning knight f4 is the only move that gives black a sizable advantage. Will it be found? Makes a lot of sense. You get your knight out of danger. You get your knight to an awesome square. D3 is a backward pawn. I mean, really, it's kind of obvious. Okay, so G3. And now I think you trade bishops and weaken the D3 pawn.
All sort of tradings in this position will benefit black for sure, because if we see in the long term, the pawn on d3 will become a liability. So I would suggest that if black can try to trade as many pieces as possible, it's good. And now, even though we don't have the pawn on d3 anymore, it's becoming a double pawn on c file, which in many of Capablanca's position, he showcased it that black is having an extra pawn basically in this type of pawn structure.
Okay, solid chess with knight d3. Oh, it was played before I could ask. I thought he was thinking about queen h3, which doesn't actually like win the game or anything, but I was wondering if he was considering it. But no, he plays knight d3. And by the way, given the match consideration, it's probably a much better idea. You only need to make a draw in this position. You don't need to mix things up. You don't even need to take this bishop right away. You just put a rook on the d file, most normal move on the board, and take that bishop at your leisure. So there's no problems in black's position. There's no weakness. The bishop on e7 is going to come to c5 whenever it gets a chance. And black seems solid. Okay, the knight does get to f5, but just a knight.
Bishop will come to c5 maybe, but that invites the knight to go to e4. So I think before it's too late, just take the bishop on c1. Because, oh, g6, nice. But now after knight e4, okay, at least your queen is already out of the pin, yeah? The knight can just move to c5.
Trade, and maybe you actually trade again. I thought he was going to trade again and play rook d8, but he plays f5, which is the more principled move. I'm still thinking about match considerations, but these youngsters, they only know how to play for a win. Okay, so e4, the queen's going to run backward. And again, Irene,
knight goes to e5. This is dangerous.
Very dangerous.
And you just want to sacrifice a rook to d2, possibly with knight f3 coming up, or double up the rook, prepare something like that.
Yeah,
I
rook
mean,
takes
anything
knight is
can
an
do.
idea. Rook takes knight can be played whenever you want. And Ivan probably needs to play on the clock here. I mean, your only advantage is your 10-second advantage on the clock. But we saw how fast Yagiz was in game 3, and he plays a double exclam move. Now he wins a pawn in addition to getting pieces off the chessboard. And this is just terrible. You have to win this as white. You're down a pawn. E4 is the strongest pawn in the history of chess. I don't know what Ivan's going to do. Maybe play on the clock, but this is not looking good.
This is not looking good at all, and the king on g2 is not helping the position at all. I mean, white is already losing a few pawns, but here, yeah, the queen's coming, rook's coming, and Yagiz can actually think about trading one of the pieces here. In any scenario in the endgame, white is going to lose anyway.
Yeah, normally in these situations you think, what's easier to win, the queen endgame or the rook endgame? But actually, black just needs to think about what is more solid, and neither of them invite any sort of danger to the position. So now it's a 2-pawn advantage. The e-pawn is going downtown. We already mentioned
this is reasonable position. Yeah, you have to move the rook, and rook d2 is coming, and then yeah, that's it. It's resign. But Ivan is okay. Ivan keeps playing. He's hoping for the clock, but Yagiz
hoping
has
for
more
a
time on
power
the clock
outage in
now.
Istanbul, I think. I don't know what he's hoping for, but she had to play it out.
Ooh.
And there you go.
That's official then. Yagiz Ardagush is the winner of the under 16 group. I mean, we have double. He won the under 13 and also he won the under 16. How amazing is that?
He has still never lost a ChessKid event, combined with the 2022 domination in the ChessKid Youth Speed Chess Championship, our previous premier event. Yagiz Ardagush is the champion of Turkey, the champion of ChessKid, and absolutely the champion of the ChessKid Youth Championship by winning both events. Irene, we were here to see it, and unlike the under 16, he didn't even need tie breaks. He won 8 out of 10 in yesterday's double round robin stage, and in the knockout today, he won 3-1 in both matches. Absolute domination. I think Yagiz is headed for good things in the chess world.
And in addition to that, he won the $3,000 for winning the under 16 and the $1,500 for winning the under 13. So he's the richest among all the kids so far in the field because he won both and then he won $4,500 in total.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to have him for an interview, but I will tell you, in all of my years interviewing kids when they win big amounts of money, Irene, they never tell me what they're going to spend their money on, except sometimes they say it's going to go in the bank, it's going to go to chess training. There's one exception. Carissa Yip once told me she's buying an iPhone. So we're just going to guess that Yagiz is buying an iPhone 27 or whatever they're up to now. I know they're not up to 27. That was a joke. But congratulations, Yagiz. Whatever you spend the money on, I am more excited about the fact that we're seeing the beginnings of chess greatness. And it's going to be really cool to follow his career in the years to come.
Yes, and this has been a great event, Mike. I'm really happy covering it with you because, well, I can say in the next maybe 10 years, I'm one of the witness of all the grades that's going to be in the candidates, you know. I believe a good amount of players in the under 13 and under 16, they'll be our future candidates. And then one of them will become the world champion.
I hope so. And if you want more Yagiz, I know he often plays in Title Tuesday, so you might get to see him in a couple of days anyway. I can't guarantee it. I don't know his exact schedule. We also hope to see him at the Olympiad. I have to assume he'll be selected for Team Turkey. That's not confirmed either, but I kind of assume that he will play. Anyway, really cool to see him. He's a nice young man, as I've mentioned early in the show. I've corresponded with his father before. They're a very grounded family, and I think they're going about his chess career in all the right ways. Before we close the show, it's time to do a quick thank yous. I want to thank all of the Chess.com and ChessKid production team. It was so cool to have the help of everybody, including our fantastic main producer, Alex. And Irene, I want to thank you. You did yeoman's work. You worked today, you worked yesterday, you worked last weekend, so thank you for joining.
It's hardly a work for me, Mike, because I've been enjoying it so far. It's hardly a work. It's not a work at all for me. And thanks for having me. And thank you for all the production team as well. Thank you to my co-host too, Mike. You've been very wonderful. And I'm just looking forward to commentating again with you in the future.
Me as well. I'd love to do that. Before we actually do the official goodbye, I do want to let you know one more time about some pretty cool gear that you should stock up on. If you go to the Chess.com merch store, we've got you covered with fresh new t-shirt designs, mittens plushies, which I know a certain someone would like. Let's see if we can ship to Jakarta, and other cool accessories. Head over to go.chess.com/merch or use the command !merch in chat to shop now before it is all sold out, and it does sometimes sell out. Well, that's it. That's all. Yagiz wins the under 13 and the under 16 of the ChessKid Youth Championship. Goodbye. And Irene, just like yesterday, you get the official sign off.
Thank you everyone for watching, and it's been great so far, and see you again in the next commentary.